My guest today is Michelle Bowdler. She is the author of Is Rape a Crime? A Memoir, an Investigation and a Manifesto. This book was longlisted for the National Book Award for Nonfiction on the Best Book list for Publishers Weekly and the Boston Globe, as well as named as a must-read by Time magazine and the Massachusetts Book Awards. She is a recipient of the Barbara Deming Memorial Award for Nonfiction. Her writing has been published in 2 anthologies, the New York Times, Miss Magazine, Psychology Today, the American Medals Association Journal of Ethics, Literary Hub, and other journals. Anita Hill writes of this book, Is Rape a Crime? Is beautifully written and compellingly told. In 2020, we were all looking for solutions, and this book was right on time. It is one we should all be reading.
There is often an assumption that people who've been through violence that people describe as, one of the worst experiences somebody can have, there's an assumption that we will forever be less than and harmed in ways that are irreparable. And while we all have moments that are hard, we also have the ability to move on and heal. A lot in the book that is hard to read, but I also feel like it is a book about hope. And there's a lot of things in the book that are about love and moving on and building a life. And so I hope that people can really see that as well as they read.
And resilience that shone through the whole way, because it's interesting now you've literally bared your soul and you have shared your story and your findings with us, but you have worked in this field kind of, professionally, but you did hold back. People didn't really know what had happened to you. And it was only, I think it was at you were talking about funding, weren't you? There was a meeting about funding, and then you shared your story for the first time. What was that like to share your story publicly for the first time?
So I work on a college campus where I do work related to, I work with the health service and the counseling center, and I had been encouraged by friends not to tell my story because I was also advocating for change related to the way we treated students who had been sexually assaulted. And somebody said to me, if people see you as somebody who's been through this experience, they're going to weigh everything you say as if it's about a personal opinion as opposed to a professional opinion. And I listened to them for a while. And then finally I was like, no, this isn't right. It's a way in which here I am advocating, and yet I feel like I'm holding back, and I'm not going to do that anymore. And so this grant was ending and students were upset, and I wanted to share my story. Mm-hmm. And I got up there and I talked about it. And I remember saying, I'm somebody who has come out every year at the annual Coming Out Day rally so that students could see that there were adults who were LGBTQ. Mm-hmm. And I felt like that was really important. And yet it was so hard to be able to be honest about something else that was true for me. And I had never really thought about the fact that I had never heard from the Boston police after one interview. Really, I just wanted to move on with my life. I wasn't somebody who was like, if they catch them, I'm going to feel better. I didn't, I have strong concerns about the U.S. criminal justice system, and we are the country that incarcerates a higher percentage of people than any other country in the world. So it wasn't like I was looking for that to feel better. But when I saw that there were 16,000 untested DNA samples, which they estimated that over 6,000 of those were rape kits, I was like, what is that? What could that be? That rape is a felony. It's often tied to attempted murder, and yet it is uniquely uninvestigated. And I started doing more and more research about untested rape evidence, and there were thousands of untested samples in cities all over the country, some estimates as high as almost 500,000. it's unfathomable that people went through 4 to 6 hour exams thinking, and rape is the least reported crime. So when you think about those numbers, it's really stunning. And that's when my advocacy work began, to try to understand what was happening. My feminism got really reignited, and I wanted to do something to bring this to people's attention. And over time, it led me to try to go back to my old case to learn what happened.
Mm-hmm. And we also really need to go back to when you were spoken to, interviewed by the police. You really weren't supported, or the language that they used, or the way that they spoke to you, was this, you were almost bothering them, you were a nuisance. And even when you called back to inquire, oh, we'll call you if there's any news. So really, how we treat victims of crimes, especially rape, is sadly, I know your book is based in the US. It could have been a book in the UK, because it feels as well that rape is decriminalized here. Of all cases that make it to court, I think maybe 2% end in conviction. 20% of cases will be reported, and we think, I was raped 3 more times, I never reported any. How many people don't report? So
Yes.
it's, as you say, we know it's one of the most heinous crimes, and decriminalized, as the title of your book suggests. Is it actually a crime anymore?
Yeah.
So you went on this journey, and you also discovered that the sexual assault unit was opened just the week before your test kit had been done. So one would assume that it would have been tested. But your journey took you into many, many different places and spaces, and sadly, you never discovered. Your kit was never tested, was it?
No, and in fact, it took a lot to go back
Yes.
and to go back. And I had met when I was doing this advocacy work, I had met probably about a dozen women who were the earliest survivors or victims, who these old kits had been tested. And what they found was, had they been tested a decade earlier or 15 years earlier, they would have identified serial perpetrators. And instead, these people had gone on to rape several more people.
Yeah, that was disturbing to read. And also, I forget her name, the woman who was raped, whose husband was a police officer.
Debbie Smith.
Yeah, and she had years and years and years of anxiety and PTSD, to then discover he'd actually been inside prison for the last 5, 6 years, and that could have just saved her all that anguish.
She was so afraid, and had she known, and that's why in the US they've named this act after her, the Debbie Smith Act.
Mm-hmm.
I was lucky that I found somebody who was patient with me.
Yeah.
I was afraid to be vulnerable and to risk anything, because I felt like my nervous system just didn't want to ever be hurt again. Even if it meant I lived a lonely, sad life, I was like,
No,
I can't.
I totally get it, totally understand. Absolutely. Yeah. And it's patience then is about respect, and it's about understanding, and it's about compassion, but ultimately it's unconditional love.
Yeah. Aren't we blessed in that? I feel so blessed. And, eventually we had children, and I wanted to live a life where I could experience the kind of love and joy and hope and meaning that I felt when I looked at my kids.